and welcome to the KrakCast. It's the news. Okay, so this week we are starting with John, who cannot be here this week's favourite topic. It's statues. Welcome to the studio. I've got Mike Dwoogie on my right, and I've got Josh Stapleton on my left.
Hello.
Mike, tell me, the news is this. Lech Kaczyński, of course, died in the famous Smolensk air tragedy of 2010, along with his wife and 94 other passengers, is to be commemorated with a statue in the centre of Warsaw. Thoughts?
Really?
Already? Too soon?
Yeah, I mean, what did he do, actually? He didn't accomplish that much as president because, well, he died. He didn't do anything bad as president. You can debate that, but is it worth a statue? And the accident, the plane crash, it was a tragedy, of course, but it wasn't like he was a martyr or he fought to keep the plane up in the air or anything along those lines. He just, died in a horrible way, and is that good enough to get a statue put up for?
Do we need a worldwide treaty on how long it should take before you're memorialised in marble? I mean, footballers now are getting statues put up with them before they reach their 40s. It's getting ridiculous. I think strangely, this has become the age of statues, maybe because they're so cheap to knock together now.
We're approaching peak statue.
I think we are, my friend. I think we are. Now, here's the thing. Okay, he was the president. He died tragically in horrendous circumstances. Are we just going to kind of create an issue because he was a controversial kind of figure, and politics at the moment is quite fraught in Poland? Is there a danger the statue goes up and then everyone is waiting until somebody defaces it, and then we have a big political scandal? Look, nobody has any respect for each other. Is it kind of a lightning rod that we don't need at the moment?
It is. I mean, I expect 15, maybe 20 minutes before the first Konstytucja t-shirt goes up on it.
I suspect. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that short answer. I was having a sip of my beer. Josh, anything to say on Lech Kaczyński's memorialisation?
Well, I mean, I don't have strong views on statues in general, but I can't help but think there is a case for memorialising him in some way. I mean, I agree. Sure. He wasn't a martyr, but I mean, he was the president. He did die in a tragic accident, along with a large number of other people, of course, some of whom also might be entitled to some kind of sculpted representation in a public space. I don't know, but
we really should cover the Smolensk crash in more detail.
Yeah.
Listeners, wait for one of our famous deep dives on that one coming up, possibly in the next month or two. We'll have
nosedive.
I'll get our interns working.
Okay, so moving on from statues to architecture, I was perusing the internet with my standard Google search term, Poland news, because it always throws up some interesting search results. And I came across an article in the New York Times about brutalist architecture.
Yeah, admit it. It's John. He has a subscription to the New York Times. That's why we have access to all this, great information.
He loves that publication so much. His New York Times T-shirt, his subscription to the
keeps him warm at night when he's sleeping on the planta.
It's his absolute favourite. And I wanted to discuss brutalist architecture on the show for a while now. It's very much your typical look at brutalist architecture article, of which there have been many down the years. And the first thing that strikes me is that the architects who are asked to quote on this always make the same point, which I just fundamentally disagree with. That whatever your city's architecture used to look like, it's part of your city's history. Ergo, it should be preserved, memorialised, celebrated, kind of restored to its former glory. But what if its former glory was a bucket of shit when it was made? We're talking about knockoffs of an architectural style that the money wasn't even there to do properly in Poland at the time these buildings were built. It's one thing, you can't even pin this one on Joe Stalin, because he preferred, what was the term, Josh?
Socialist realism.
Which is like, the fluted columns, the kind of more classical...
It's like Nowa Huta, which actually does look impressive and interesting.
That's the type of architecture, it might be Soviet in origin, but it's certainly pretty. I mean, it's easy on the eye. I think, just to pass it over to you guys, I want to say one thing about architecture. We mastered exteriors and facades hundreds of years ago. It's why the best parts of nearly all cities are 19th or 18th century. These beautiful, in Dublin, it's the beautiful Georgian houses, the minimalist kind of lovely stone features about the windows, and just the plain, simple, classic designs. Shouldn't we be focusing our energy on interiors and stop trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to crazy shapes? And, it's one thing with skyscrapers. I like it with skyscrapers. And I want to pass it to you, Josh, because I know you have a lot to say about architecture. You're a learned and knowledgeable man, which I am far from on this topic. But, my general point is the forum can go to hell, and so can all its cousins.
Well, I more or less agree with you, but I think as kind of an introduction to talking about brutalist architecture, I think it's important to state that brutalist is just one strand in what's more generally known as modernist architecture. And I have to say that good modernist architecture, in my opinion, can be absolutely superb and very, very exciting and interesting to look at. What I think about brutalist architecture, and as it's commonly understood, is that this was a strand of modernism, most famously exemplified by Le Corbusier, who was probably the leading modernist architect of the 20th century. And the essence of the style, and that brutalism I'm talking about, is very simplistic. Use of raw concrete, rectangular, rectilinear, square forms. At its best, it could be startlingly stark and in your face in its uncompromising kind of, squareness.
What's an example of a really good modernist building then?
Well, okay, there are... there was a lot in Britain. I have some knowledge of Britain from coming from there, and there was a huge amount of necessary rebuilding after the Second World War, particularly of housing, local authority housing, social housing, which had to be relatively inexpensive, and lots of that housing was frankly horrible and very ugly, and some of it, a large amount of it, no longer exists. There are a few. There's a very famous estate in Sheffield, the Park Hill Estate, which is massive and has recently had a substantial renovation. And there is something about it that there's so much of it, and it spreads for so much. A bit like the famous Falowiec in Gdansk. It's just so vast and occupies so much of the landscape that there is a certain kind of impressiveness about that. The downside, really, of brutalist architecture is connected with its use of concrete and the fact that in the majority of cases, the concrete is never finished or treated. And concrete tends towards the colour grey in damp climates.
Tends toward the colour grey. I love that, yes. It certainly does.
In damp climates, there's over time, because it's reinforced with steel rods inside, and those steel rods corrode, and then the rust
the
colour
oxide comes out, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Kind of seeps through to the surface. It responds very poorly to rain.
It gives it personality.
Grey with a hint of excrement.
Well, rather like... there are some lovely old stone buildings. In Britain we have the Cotswolds, and then there are other parts of the world. Stone can age and weather. Lichens grow on it.
Exactly.
It grows lovely.
It looks better the older it gets.
But concrete, on the other hand, just gets worse and worse and worse. Now, to be fair to Poland, I noticed that a lot of the 60s, 70s era housing blocks made of concrete have been given a lick of paint. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they've been given multicoloured licks of paint by local residents.
I don't like that either when they're all orange and blue and bright.
Where do they come up with these colours? They just look wrong.
Yeah,
Mikey, jump in here. Tell me about the Krakow specific monstrosities that kind of get up your nose. Or are you a fan of brutalist?
No, I'm not a fan. And I know you're trying to get me started on Forum here. And guess what? I despise that building. It is the most.
Me too. Putting a few hipsters on the ground floor doesn't make it a success.
Yeah, it's like I can get drunk anywhere. I'm happy. It's like it's nice to have a lot of open air space, but that doesn't mean the building is nice. It's a freaking billboard now. It was designed in the 70s based on architectural concepts from the 50s. It wasn't finished until the late 80s, and it basically only functioned for like 12 years, looking old already. It was the most modern hotel in the city, and it was only 4-star and 20 years old at the time it opened it. And now it's a freaking billboard. I'm just glad that the architect lived long enough to see that place become a ruin and just...
Let me tell you, the development it advertises is on my side of the river. I can't remember the exact name of it. It's past, if you go past the State Street building and just keep walking towards the kind of water plant that's on the river, there's on your left-hand side, there's a beautiful... brand new, modern, wrapped with this exquisite space age looking metal grey.
Oh, it's great.
It's
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
really nice,
stunning. And an example of exactly the opposite of what I was just saying, which is that we can't do exteriors anymore. Okay, we can do it sometimes, but I still think my point holds that in Dublin, we're restoring all Georgian buildings are restored. You restore the majesty and you use the modern technology to go and to create the interior that the past never could deliver. But in Dublin, there's a street, and I'm letting myself down here. I should have Googled it before we started, where they were knocked down a row of Georgian houses. And now the buildings that replaced them have been knocked down and replaced with, guess what? Mock Georgian houses that were being designed to look exactly like they did.
Genuine imitations.
Yes. Yeah, genuine imitations. And everyone's like, yeah, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, actually, even the village I grew up in, there was a small kind of terrace of Georgian-looking houses that were really very authentic-looking, except for the fact they all had garages. But they did have, the little pediments above the windows and the sash windows and kind of whatever the decorative things are called.
Moving on to energy issues. The Prime Minister, Morawiecki.
Morawiecki, yeah.
Excuse me, is it Mateusz?
Oh, God, now you're giving me a blank here.
It's definitely a double M.
Yeah.
It's definitely a double M. Yeah, unveiled his plan for a massive gas installation program, basically, around the country. It's something I've been saying for years. Makes a lot of sense to get Poland away from burning so much coal, improve the air quality, hopefully get the price down. Modern gas boilers are extremely efficient. They're called condensing boilers. They don't really produce anything but water vapor. Mike, what do you think about the plan and the fact that, yet again, they've claimed that it's financeable because they've shut down tax mafias?
Oh, well, gas, it's everywhere in the world, I guess. But the funny thing is, most of the gas in Poland anyway, a large chunk of it still has to come from Russia. So it's like we have energy independence. But yes, the truth is they have found more reserves here. And a lot of the gas will be actually gas from converted coal plants. You probably know more about that, but you can actually convert coal that's in the ground into gas. And Poland has plenty of that. So when it comes to the actual resource, I don't think we'll be in short supply, but why is gas the only thing getting a kick here instead of figuring out ways to make electricity cheap for electric heaters or scrubbers for burning coal at home or higher quality coal? Morawiecki was actually part of a group before he became prime minister that wanted to introduce laws to increase requirements for higher quality coal. Now that he's in power, basically that same law that he tried to fight 2 years ago has been introduced, with the only change being is you can still buy cheap shitty coal when you're at the store, but you have to get a certificate saying that what level of coal quality it is. But when it comes to tax mafias, peace has been praising itself, patting itself on the back
constantly,
but they really haven't achieved much. They've introduced some legislations that have closed off some loopholes.
Okay, really interested in this. Wait, what loopholes have they really gone after, and how much of it would you say it's just the booming economy with receipts up and actually loophole closing?
I'm guessing more of it has to do with the economy and the loopholes. They've shut down some loopholes, especially with VAT taxes. But the main reason that a lot of people have been paying their taxes now is just because of the presence of peace.
The peace effect.
Basically, everybody's afraid of peace. They're like the kind of they're not soft spoken. Everybody is under the impression that if you screw up something, peace is going to come down at 3 a.m. and shoot you in the face.
Could you say that people are less inclined to take the peace?
Yeah.
All right, I've been resisting a piss and peace joke for a long time. Okay,
and their opposition party is PO. So for Christ's sakes, they're both.
So that's very interesting. So what you're saying is that a lot of people would have, just when peace took power, they might have toned down certain scams.
They thought it wasn't worth the risk.
They thought the enforcement was going to ramp up.
Exactly. And when they say they're getting more receipts from VAT taxes, everybody always forgets that when it came to the systems that mafia groups were using to cheat VAT taxes, it wasn't that they were not paying taxes, but they created these VAT carousels. We had different companies, different EU countries, fictitiously selling products between each other, like cell phones, importing it from the Czech Republic to Poland to Germany. And these companies then would go to their government, give them these receipts saying we bought these products and exported them. So give us back our VAT that's due. And the government okay, so here's your VAT. So you're not paying taxes. The government is giving you money that you never actually paid into the system to begin with. You're defrauding it. And those are tens of billions of zlotys per year. And that's really slowed down this. The problem was you could never really, back then, you could assume some companies were cheating the system and others were not, but you couldn't tell just by looking at the receipts. You would actually have to get a report or some inside information saying like, oh, this company doesn't actually exist.
And it's been an issue, I would say, in pretty much every developed economy in the EU. Ireland had a tax carousel scam. It was very controversial. I think it's been largely quelled, but you do hear rumours of it still going on to this day. Josh, I mean, generally, you'd have to be kind of in favour of a gas modernisation plan, wouldn't you? I mean, it's, you know, it seems like sensible legislation, sensible incentives, sensible investment from governments to kind of back the cleaner technology, the well proven. We're not talking about some exotic coal fusion plant here. You know, this is pretty
turn coal into diamonds. Yes.
Well, yeah, no, I think like absent nuclear power, which as you know, I'm a firm advocate of, as you know, low cost, you know, clean, blah 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 blah. I think that expanding the gas network is eminently sensible. And I think it's actually it's not only sensible, it's also practical. And I think you mentioned, Mike, about improving the efficiency of electric heating. Well, unfortunately, with electric heating, you just butt up against the laws of physics, which is, you know... I didn't want to interrupt this flow, Josh.
No, but I was talking about mainly the production of electricity and the source of electricity to bring down pricing. So I mean, efficiency as in price.
Yeah, I mean, which is my big kind of like, you know, argument in favour of nuclear, because,
exactly.
Absent too many kind of like, over heavy hand of regulation, then nuclear is also very cheap. And we want electricity to be cheap, really. We don't want to be paying a lot for electricity just because it's sinful to be able to, you know, have light in our homes. I mean,
your air conditioning burn in hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's... it is actually, the cost of energy is one of the biggest burdens on our everyday lives.
Absolutely.
It's reflected everywhere. It affects wages. It's a cost on businesses. It's a cost on individuals. The food that you buy costs more if energy costs more to transport it, prepare it, whatever.
Well, look at France. You know, I mean, they built their nuclear network a long time ago. These are old coal water plants, which are nowhere near as cool as the new thorium molten salt technology that people are talking about now that you could possibly build. And even with that older system, because France has the scale, it has the engineering know-how, it is able to deliver energy at a cheaper price per unit than any other country in the EU. And it does so. I think they generate 97% of their power from their nuclear.
It's a huge bulk.
And we don't look at that example closely enough. There it is, like right in front of us. Look, France did it. You know, I mean, it's
perfectly fine. And Germany was doing it as well until, Gazprom decided to give them a few bribes and like, okay, we'll close down our nuclear power plants. So that means we need more gas.
Seamlessly moving us into our next topic, Mike. Yeah. Nicely done. The V4, Poland's little breakaway group with the bad name, which is, you're not sure if it's named after the G7 or a fucking rocket or something, have actually come out. And one of the big takeaways from their first big meeting was their opposition to Nord Stream, the pipeline network that Russia's planning to hook straight into Germany. And there is a little bit of talking out the side of your mouth going on with the EU for a long time when it comes to Russian gas. Is, we kind of depend on it as a resource. Should we be doubling down and building that pipeline? Should more people be opposing it? Or are the V4 just trying to get their names in the paper?
Well, the Nord Stream gas line, because this is going to be Nord Stream 3 now. I've just gotten confused because it's been going on for like 15 years now. The first one that's constructed, so many economic analysis claimed that it would actually never make any financial sense. No matter how much gas went through it and how cheap it was, the actual construction costs didn't make sense. It was another source of gas, but it was cheaper anyway to bring it in through the UK and through the Ukraine, that is, and Poland. Mm-hmm. But of course, Russia likes to use gas as a political leverage, as a political tool, and not necessarily just an economic export. And, when you get a previous German chancellor becoming, part of the board of Gazprom, it does look a little, maybe just a tinge dodgy there. And all of a sudden the EU is all for it. They talk about energy independence, that they want to cut back on nuclear energy, which basically means, renewables, well, whatever, stop laughing. But I said stop laughing, not start laughing. all of a sudden, Russia has a lot more influence and sway on Germany, which is basically a sway over all of the EU. I mean, you can't disregard that. You have to, it's obvious.
I have to rewind for a second because there was some very bad hosting there. I should have really explained for our listeners who are not as intimately knowledgeable about the topic as Mike and yourself what the hell the V4 actually is. It's a grouping of 4 countries: the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia.
The Visegrad 4, yes,
which is an allusion to the famous Congress of Visegrad in 1335, of course, John of Bohemia. Yes, I did Google
we were
that.
all there.
Okay, so with that in mind, is it going to be an effective block? Is this just basically saying to the EU, look, we've got your number, you need unanimity to do anything against us, so here's the V4, like, stop sanctioning us, leave Article 7 alone, it's going nowhere, guys, because you need everyone else in the EU to vote against us anyway, and that's not going to happen. Is that the point of the V4?
They definitely want to create like the
club within the club.
Club within the club, exactly. And they just want to show that the EU is not one uniform group, because if the EU was one uniform group, then it's basically just Germany and France.
Yeah.
And everybody forgets about that. But the EU is supposed to be 27? Oh God, I feel like an ignorant asshole.
Soon to be 27.
So, I was like 27 or 28.
28 currently.
Okay, now
Josh is counting the days.
Oh, there is a big clock above his head here right now. It's like a big smiley face and a cold beer.
We're timing our Brexit debate, by the way, people, for when things get really juicy. There will be one, but the end stages of that process are approaching. So, sorry, Mike.
The EU is made of many countries and many different interests, and unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's just France and Germany. And it shouldn't be France, Germany, and the satellite nations. It should be a union of different countries and different nations with different viewpoints trying to work together. Unfortunately, whenever some countries go against France and Germany, they're always considered anti-EU.
Yeah.
It's like, well, which one is it then? Are we trying to come to a compromise and work together, or are we just supposed to do what the big boys tell us? So the V4 is definitely one of those groups starting to show that there is unified opposition to certain trends. I mean, this is normal in any type of democracy. As soon as you are in a situation where you have everybody going the same way, well, then you have a totalitarian, fascist, or statist system. If everybody's voting the same way, that means something's not right. And I like the fact that there's the V4 and there are other groups in Europe as well that oppose, if it's economic or certain political movements, it's a sign that there is actually any freedom.
And it makes a lot of sense for all of those countries, of course, because, I mean, out of the V4, the only significant in terms of size and wealth country is Poland, and the other 3 are individually, minnows, but I mean, collectively as a block with Poland, then it then represents a sizable chunk of.
Exactly. It shows that, there are people here and they actually have, something to say. And, hello, listen to us. We're raising our hand here in the back row. We count too.
I'm going to simplify our next topic a little bit, but Poland hasn't just been making friends with Hungary in the EU. It's also been taking quite an interest in a case that Greece is taking against the Germans for.
The Germans.
Yes, people, you've guessed it. 22 minutes in, and we are about to talk some Nazi stuff. Yes. I don't know. Some have said on the KrakCast the Nazis come up quite often. I say, sue us, which is exactly what Greece are planning to do. But basically, you see what I did there.
Yes.
But basically, his Polish counterpart of the Greek guy, Arkadiusz Mularczyk, am I saying that correctly? Probably not.
Yeah.
Wants to make this point. If you think Greece has a claim on war reparations, wait till you see the document we're going to submit. So basically what they're saying is, the few villages ruined. Okay, so the rumour is that Poland is going to submit a similar claim, but for 740 billion euro.
Wow!
I mean, look,
a lot of wonga.
The Second World War,
give or take, of course,
is a long time ago. Communism was a long time ago. I thought the new narrative was Poland is a strong, independent democracy that won't be told what to do by anybody and doesn't need everybody's help. That this is a country that is excelling on its own 2 feet.
Yes, don't intervene unless you're giving us money.
Does this send a bit of a strange mixed message to the EU, What is going on here? Like, why can't Polish politics let this subject die? I mean...
well, with the EU and Poland, it kind of works both ways. But the truth is, this is also pandering to the domestic audience here. To get everybody riled up against the EU or against other countries or against Germany. It's like when something's...
Everybody already hates the Nazis, I mean...
Yeah, I don't think anybody likes the Nazis, or if no. But the Nazis have gotten old, and we need a bad guy or something like that for movies. It's like if Indiana Jones 5, who's going to be the bad guy now? It's like.
But this is serious stuff. They're actually like talking about doing this. I mean, it seems to be something that comes from Kaczynski. This kind of belief that we should always bash the Germans for what went on, but at the same time, we're closely with them as our democratic allies within the EU. But at the same time, castigate them for their attitude towards refugee quotas, and there's always this weird double messaging going on.
Well, isn't it just politics 101 really, which is that you advance kind of an idea that is, by any reasonable assumptions patently absurd, but you push it out there, and then there's the inevitable kind of pushback, but still it exists there, or if it's not new in the consciousness, you're keeping it there. I mean,
I tell you what does exist. A massive subsection of the German auto industry exists in Poland now. That's the type of relationship I'd like to see Poland have with Germany. Why do we have to get relitigating, a war that
for everyone,
the most studied, the most talked about, the war that everybody knows who was the fucking bad guy? Okay, nobody would ever claim that the Nazis didn't destroy this country. Okay, it's just an absolute fact.
But
why always come back to reparations? I just don't understand it.
Well, the truth is, Poland never really got true reparations because of Soviet influence. They weren't allowed to take part in the Marshall Plan, and all the Eastern Bloc nations were told to play nice. So technically, Poland, or the communist regime in Poland, played nice with the communist regime in East Germany. So no, we don't want any money back. We're going to work this out. We don't need your help. Blah blah blah. And now they're saying, the politicians living now are saying well, we didn't really have much of a choice back then. So Gimme.
Because it was never going to happen, because then the Brits knew, next there'll be colonial reparations, and then it'll be this, and then it'll be that. Because the point of the matter is, war has been a state of human... I'm just speaking badly now. I just can't get the words out. But you know what I'm saying? War bad. And war has always been there, okay? So if we start relitigating every war and every dispute, where does it end? I just don't see the point of this, other than, like you say, throwing meat to the base.
I don't recall Germany kind of paying for all that brutalist architecture that went up in the UK in the 1960s and 70s. So,
send us more concrete.
Yeah, although actually we did have quite a few German emigre architects, so maybe that was their...
So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on that.
But the thing is, you have to also be careful, because after World War II, Poland gained a lot of land from Germany for land they lost in the East, and it wasn't exactly their choice. But, Germany could always say, okay, our reparations...
Poznan and Breslau,
that should cover. It's but that was another situation where it really wasn't Poland's choice. Poland lost a lot of land that they wanted, when we go back to, half of the Ukraine, Polish cities there, it's
not constructive, is it? For everything peace deal would say, the left hand say the plan to nationalise, or to have a national gas network that's upgraded, or you can say that's just classic policy making. There's nothing controversial about that. There's always this other hand where they have to go to the EU and throw the reparations bomb, and it's like, it just tires me out trying to keep up with it all. It really does. Anyway, I want to talk about something a little bit more light-hearted, a little bit more interesting.
More light-hearted than Nazis?
A little bit, slightly. It's about cars as well, though. There's the German connection. So, one of the things that all of us who live in Krakow love is the story of the Fiat Maluch, and something caught my eye in the news the other day. There's still nearly 37,000 of these bad boys registered in Krakow. First, that can't be right, surely.
That's absurd, isn't it? I mean, if there were that many, you'd be seeing them... all the time, and I probably see barely 2 a week if I...
Maybe all the ones in the scrapyard are still registered or something, or I bet an awful lot of people, because they're so small as well, keep one in their garage, never drive it, and kind of go.
They forget it's there.
It's now used as a kind of drinks container or something. Mike, do you have any thoughts on the Maluch?
It's a cute car. Everybody has, positive nostalgia to it and reminiscence. I mean, I was talking to you guys earlier before we went on the air, the fact that when we moved to Australia, we actually had a Maluch. One brought in from the UK, so the steering wheel was on the other side, but it was the weirdest little car there in the 80s in Poland. And my dad was really proud of it, because it was a little piece of something Polish looking while we're living in Australia.
Let me get this straight, because Australians love their cars, this is big motor city. You're driving around in a Fiat. That is so cool. On the open road of Australia, thousands of miles of highway, and you're dad's rocking the Maluch, man.
It's like my dad's like 6'2" or something like that. So
no
like,
way! Oh my god!
So it's even more hilarious. He's driving up like in his little car next to like an Australian ute or something like that. But everybody would stop and stare at the car. We're like in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. You've got like Benzes and Porsches at the red light. As soon as it went green, the Maluch was the first thing to drive away because we were just like staring at it, jaws dropped, and like what the hell is that?
Josh, man, you're a bit of a car nerd. Come on, give me some good stuff about the Fiat Maluch.
Channel some Clarkson here.
Channel some Clarkson. Yeah. Get your leather jacket on.
So like, courtesy
Please don't hit me.
I'm Irish. I've done my research. I looked at the Wikipedia page for 20 minutes, and the Fiat 126 was introduced in 1972. It was in production in Poland until the year 2000. There were in total 4.7 million of them made. It was a replacement to the original Fiat 500 Cinquecento,
which made an unfortunate comeback about a decade ago,
as a kind of designer accessory. It was hugely. I mean, it was launched in Italy. Fiat, an Italian brand, but the majority of them were made in Bielsko-Biała in Poland.
It's quite unique in terms of that type of arrangement, wasn't it? I mean, that was what made it such a strange auto icon, that it was built behind the Iron Curtain, if you like.
Well, Fiat managed to do what no other Western car manufacturer was able to do, which was to establish commercial ties across the whole, actually, of the Soviet bloc as well, because there was the Zhiguli and the FSO and the Lada, which were all kind of like Fiat licensed kind of vehicles, although in the Russian cases they were the same to look at, but they had rather inferior kind of suspension and transmission.
So the Polish ones were much better built. Is that what you're saying?
The Polish ones were better, but I mean the 126 is kind of in a class of its own, because it was a new car that was designed expressly to be built in Poland.
So this is the big model. This is the 126 is the speed machine, basically. What type of engine are we rocking here?
Well, it was initially, I think it was a 594cc, just under 600, later expanded to 654, although I think the horsepower remained at a somewhat heady 25.
That's if you stick your leg out the door and push a little harder. Yeah.
Although I think the bigger engine did give it a little bit more torques.
Yeah, they are so cool looking though. Like they have a kind of compact, beautiful, mini-like nature to them, but even smaller than with their much smaller.
Well, no, actually, that was the interesting thing, because they look absolutely tiny, but their dimensions, their exterior dimensions, are exactly the same as the original Mini.
Ah.
And we kind of forget, because the BMW Mini that we're probably more used to seeing is a vastly bigger car, even though actually so is the rebooted Fiat 500 is much bigger than its predecessor.
It is indeed.
Get used to that. But like you see an original Mini and you put it next to a Maluch, they are actually the same size, height, width, length, and so on. And they were the only car opportunity, actually, for Polish people in the 70s and 80s.
Wasn't there a thing about souping them up like a bit later? Then that came along. Like there was kind of a regeneration of interest after communism in the Maluch, and people started like putting. Am I just making this up? Like
when I visited in the early '90s, I saw people making them into convertibles, putting sunroofs in them, making the hatchbacks.
So it is the iconic car of Poland in the recent. I mean, I can't think of any car that kind of means more to Poles than the Maluch.
I mean, again, culled from the Wikipedia article, it was like at the bottom there are kind of nicknames in kind of popular usage, and the thing that's interesting is that the various citations are all countries that were communist countries at one point. So that, for example, in Cuba, which most people tend to think of as having like endlessly repaired 1950s
old
Cadillacs,
American Oldsmobiles,
and so on. It was called the Polquito, which is
I like that name better.
Cuban kind of argot for little Pole or little Polish.
Hey, it's cold outside.
In Hungary, it was called the Kispolski, which is Hungarian for little Pole, or the Eger Camion, which is rather cute, which translates as Mouse's Truck.
Oh.
Yes, I thought you'd like that. In Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, it was known as the Peglica, which translates as Little Iron. So nobody needs to know what that means in English. And in Germany, East Germany, presumably it was called, with characteristic Teutonic precision, the Bambino.
Don't like
because it was an Italian baby made in Poland.
That sounds like a summer vacation that went wrong.
That's about as much as I can say.
Maluch is a classic nickname, though, isn't it? Like,
well, it means little one. So
little
the
baby,
other countries just add little Polish one to it. So,
It's basically like the nickname they will give Kaczyński if he ever visits them or something.
Our Polster. Oh, no, that's where we live, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much it for the news this week, I think, guys. Anything I've missed here? Oh, a Polish chef got named the best chef in Britain. I thought that was interesting. I don't know why.
I think a lot of French people are probably laughing about that.
And John sent me a link about horses, of course, because he's obsessed.
So now first we talk food, now we're talking horses.
Yeah, now we're talking horses. Yeah, horse pulling carriage collapses by Vavel reignites debate about animal abuse. Dave doesn't bother reading link. And that's it for the news. Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye now.